All righty. I see Kara nodding, so I think that means that the slide deck is visible to you, which is good. Kara and the Alumni Association, thank you very much for inviting me. It occurred to me as you were describing that you have the privilege of inviting anyone from around the world to these events. I'm sorry to all of you because you're just stuck with me. I wouldn't call myself the world's foremost expert on any topic, but I'm happy to be here sharing the bit of information I have about some very basic ideas on ways that you can reduce your climate impact at home. Some of these tips that I'm going to share are things that you've probably heard of. Some of the information might be new to you. I hope that it's new. I hope to not just be repeating things that you already know. But here's a quick overview of what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a little bit of a rah-rah on what the University of Maryland is doing for climate action, and then we're going to pivot into talking about climate action at home. So specifically, I'll touch on your electricity supply, your car, heating systems, and food. And then, of course, we'll hopefully save a little time for Q&A at the end. And the picture on the left side of the screen is a reminder to me of the fact that we're living in a climate altered world already. I spent a lot of my childhood in historic Ellicott City, which is sadly the scene of this picture here. It was struck by two 1,000-year floods in the course of just 2 years, and it's been largely devastated because of that. So Maryland is considered one of the states that's most impacted by climate change. As the sea level is rising, coastal communities are being displaced. Maryland coastal properties have already lost more than 25% of their value compared to non-coastal properties. Saltwater is intruding into our agricultural lands, harming crop production and displacing farmers. By the time our current University of Maryland undergrad students reach retirement age, the majority of Maryland's summer will consist of extreme heat days. So these are just some of the implications of climate change here in Maryland, which motivates me to work on some of these issues for the university. So let me give you a little bit of information on what's happening at UMD. I'm going to overwhelm you with Maryland red in this presentation. So I hope that you're a Terp through and through. So the scenes on campus recently have looked somewhat like this. This photo, I think, won the Diamondbacks photo contest last April when they called out to people like, send us your photos of what campus looks like these days. And this one came in. Obviously, the last 12 months have been unique for the university and for everywhere around the world with a lot of mask mandates and social distancing. Nonetheless, sustainability, we carry on and have been implementing some things through our office and through facilities management and through the larger university. Last year, the university met its goal of supplying 100% of its grid supplied electricity from 100% renewable resources. We have a significant amount of on-campus renewable energy, including about 3 megawatts of solar power on 4 different large facilities, including the Regents Drive parking garage and the middle of campus, which is pictured here. We have a commitment that all new buildings, starting with the Arib Center for Computer Science and Innovation, which opened just a couple years ago, will be carbon neutral in their operations. So that means that 100% of the electricity delivered to these facilities needs to come from renewable sources. And if there's any on-site combustion, typically of natural gas, that happens to support the facility, then we need to offset those emissions to have net zero climate impact. We were also the first large university that we're aware of to achieve carbon neutral air travel. That means that we calculate the climate impact of all of the air travel that faculty, staff, and students do every year. And then we invest in carbon mitigation projects like tree plantings that sequester or avoid an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide as is emitted by all of the air travel that we do. We're also focused on serving healthy, low-impact foods in our dining halls. And altogether over the last decade and a half, the university has reduced its emissions so far by 56%. And a little shameless plug, if you're interested in learning more about what the university is doing and seeing some of our data that back up some of the numbers that I shared and many other sort of categories of sustainability action, it's all available on our website at sustainability.umd.edu. So far, the university's climate action has been equivalent to providing carbon-free energy to more than 48,000 average American homes. By the time the university achieves its goal of carbon neutrality or net zero emissions, that climate impact will be equivalent to the eliminating the carbon footprint of about 85,000 average American homes. So that's kind of what we're doing, at a university scale. And the point of this talk today is really about, what you can do at home. So, I hear you like, yay, good for you, university. Let's talk about me now. So I'll pivot here and we'll talk about you. This is a snapshot of carbon emissions per capita in the United States. The data is a little bit dated, being 10 years old, but I think still relevant. So as you can see, a little more than half of the typical American's carbon footprint comes from transportation and from housing. And then you also have products, services, and food. There's a lot in there, and there's a lot of information online about how to eliminate or reduce your environmental impact across all of these different categories. Today, we're going to focus on just 4 actions that when you implement, you will be addressing the carbon footprint, probably about half of your carbon footprint, or at least half of the average American carbon footprint. So we'll focus on our electricity supply, our car, our heating systems, and importantly, how that clean electricity supply can be the fuel source, the carbon-free fuel source for your car and your heating systems at home. And then just for kicks, we'll throw in some food information too. So let's start with 100% renewable electricity supply. As I said, the university accomplished this for all of our imported electricity as of 2020. I've been doing it here at my home for, I don't even know how long, probably nearly a decade. It's easier than a lot of people think, and that's because you've got several options for doing it. So one, the thing that most people think of is that you can install solar panels on your roof. And you can do that actually in a number of ways. One is that you could outright buy solar panels and have them installed on your house. As you might already know, there's a significant upfront cost to that. There are great federal and state and sometimes local incentives to bring down the upfront cost. And then once they're installed, those panels are producing for you essentially free 100% renewable electricity for the life of those panels. So depending on the incentives, these systems sometimes can achieve a payback within 5 years. Sometimes that payback is more like 10 years, but the panels should last at least 20. So you're looking at significant return on investment if you're able to make that upfront cost work. You also see some homes, and you might know some people, or some of you might yourself have solar panels that you installed at no cost to you, and that's done through a power purchase agreement. And sometimes, and something that I participate, I've got a bunch of big trees surrounding my roof. So my roof isn't ideal for rooftop solar, but I participate in something called a community solar project. And that is where I basically have a set of solar panels dedicated to me at a facility that's a few miles from my home. That was, part of a larger solar project. So there are different models for a power purchase agreement. Here's the kicker though, and this gets a little bit into the weeds, and we're not going to get all the way into these weeds, but when you enter into a power purchase agreement, you're actually going to enter a contract that allows you to pay a lower rate for electricity. And the reason you're getting a lower rate is because technically the electricity that you're using, and this is counterintuitive, but technically it isn't 100% renewable power. Technically what's happening is that the renewable energy that's produced by your rooftop system or your community solar system, that is renewable power that's going into your regional grid. The grid operator, Pepco in my case, here in Maryland, in this part of Maryland, really is the one who's buying that renewable energy energy and giving it, retiring it on behalf of all of its customers. So technically, I can't have a claim through a power purchase agreement that I am myself using that 100% renewable power. I do have the feel good that I helped contribute to the development of new solar power in our region, though. And that's actually one of the reasons I want to really orient people to this last one, grid supplied renewable energy. And this is also relevant not only to homeowners, which the other two were relevant to homeowners as well, but this is really the only one that's accessible to renters. Because anyone who pays a utility bill in most of the states in the US have the opportunity to simply select a renewable energy supplier for their electricity supply. So these are, renewable energy projects that exist, really anywhere in your region or even around the country. You'll pay a small premium on your electricity bill to get 100% renewable electricity. But even if you're doing one of these other things, if you have solar on your roof, which probably isn't producing 100% of the power that you use at home, or a power purchase agreement, you can still have that grid supplied renewable energy, even if you have the on-site solar. And if you can't fit the on-site solar, or it just doesn't work for you, then the grid supplied renewable energy is a simple thing to do. And it's something you can do right now. In fact, I hope that you multitask and you wind up following some of these tips and signing up for it today. So most states allow, yep.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
That came in? Okay. So I have a question. How do we know that grid supplied renewable energy is additional? For example, like Arcadia Solar similarly is purchasing solar from your utility additional.
So the additionality piece is and this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but it's a really critical piece of carbon offsetting and renewable energy. And the short story here is that it's important to remember, or to learn that a renewable energy project, like a solar farm or wind farm, is really producing two things. One is electricity, which really flows to the closest electricity user. And then the other one is what's called a renewable energy certificate, or a REC. And that's this abstract thing that says, okay, this wind turbine produced 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy. And we're going to transfer the rights, the claim of that renewable energy, to whoever's buying those rights. And that's, and again, I know it's a little bit murky, but really it's the certification body behind that allows for there to be knowledge that there is additionality to this renewable energy credit. And when I'm signing up for 100% renewable electricity, there's then that guarantee, hopefully, that the renewable energy certificates are legitimate and transferred to me. I don't know if I did a good job of explaining that just now, but it's a little bit of a wonky thing about how the renewable electricity market works.
And just one more question: how large is the premium, quote unquote premium?
So the premium that I'm paying here is about a 10% premium on my electric supply, on the standard electric supply rate that I get through PEPCO. Now, because of that community solar project, I also get a 5% reduction on my electricity rate through that project. So on net, it's nearly a wash. I don't use that much electricity in any case, but I'm probably paying literally a few dollars more per month in net than I would otherwise. So this option that we're talking about in terms of subscribing to green power is available to most people across the United States. I wanted to mention, you can go to competitiveenergy.org to get your state-specific information. I think in Maryland, it's called Electricity Choice Maryland. And what you can do is go to your state's electricity choice website, and that should be set up to help you identify the suppliers that offer 100% renewable energy. It is important, I think, to do a separate search for, to check the reviews of those companies, because some companies have gotten in trouble especially with trying to get people in with low rates, and then a year later when the contract ends, sort of quietly jacking up your rate. So you know, definitely check reviews. You want to get, you know, kind of get involved with a reputable company that won't do that. Some of these companies also offer what they call carbon neutral natural gas, which really means that they are calculating the carbon impact of your personal gas supply and then buying carbon credits on top of that to eliminate the climate impact of your natural gas consumption. So you can also sign up for that product. I think that's a good option for trying to go carbon neutral for your home energy, all you know, in one shot. But I think it's important to think about, and where the rest of this presentation is going is really the longer term structural transition to a carbon-free home. So that's my really quick overview on your sort of 100% renewable electric supply options. I can tell you that here, I know a number of the participants today are from Maryland. There's some good suppliers. Feel free to reach out to me if you happen to be in Maryland and you want some guidance on how to select a renewable energy supplier. I'm happy to give you my email at the end of this. All right, so next I want to talk about electric vehicles. So this you might already understand, but I'm hoping that you make a commitment that your next vehicle, if you need one, will be an electric vehicle. Now let's get the if you need one out of the way first and foremost. If you have a living and working situation where you can walk, bike, take mass transit, excellent. If you don't need a car or can ride share, great. Like, please don't buy 2,000 pounds of, you know, glass, steel, and rubber to move around everywhere. But because of the geography of our development, the typical American, especially the typical American homeowner, does own a car. So it's important to note that electric vehicles today, even with standard electricity supply, are cleaner than your traditional, you know, gas-powered cars in most states. And especially if you have 100% renewable electricity supply, then you basically have carbon-free form of transportation. Let's talk about the cost effectiveness of an electric vehicle. So as of last year, the average electric vehicle achieved a payback of 5 years. That means that, as many of you know, right now there's an additional upfront cost that many people are paying, either with or without incentives, federal or state incentives, to buy an electric vehicle. Well, that electric vehicle is going to cost you less to fuel and to maintain than a comparable internal combustion engine vehicle. So as of last year, the typical payback on that initial upfront investment was 5 years. That is quickly decreasing. If you've been paying attention to some of the news about electric vehicles, you're seeing Tesla has dropped their prices. They're like every few months they're dropping the prices. The Chevy Bolt just decreased its price like $3,000, I want to say. You know, the prices are coming down because the battery technology is getting you know, less and less expensive, which is great. So because the advancements in battery technology, an electric vehicle is expected to reach what's called purchase price parity. In other words, it'll cost you no more than its comparable gasoline counterpart by 2024. That's just within the next 3 years. They will cost the same upfront to buy, but the EV will deliver instant savings as soon as you start driving it. So it's very exciting. It's one of the reasons why there's a major projection that, you know, especially in the later half of this decade, there's going to be a major ramp up in the purchase and use of electric vehicles. All right, so let's shift to heating equipment. Take that same concept of the environmental benefits of the electric vehicle and apply it now to your home heating equipment, and realize that efficient electric heating equipment can be your carbon-free, very comfortable way of living at home. So, you know, one of our big long-term challenges is getting rid of the natural gas that is used by millions and millions of households across the country. This is a very hard part of the transition. The vehicles, there's complication there, but it's relatively easy compared with this part of the transition. That's because there's several different devices that are pretty well baked into our home infrastructure that are using natural gas. The biggest, culprit is our space heating system. It uses 70% of the natural gas in our house. A quarter of the natural gas that we use is for water heating. And then we use about 3% for cooking. And if you have a gas clothes dryer, it's about 1% of your gas use is for that. So here are your typical efficient electric heating systems. You've got an air source heat pump. This, by the way, is the most common heating and cooling system across the entire South Atlantic region. I think as of 2015, about 3/4 of all homes were already built and using air source heat pumps. So this is a very common system, especially in warmer climates. The technologies are advancing and they're becoming more and more common in even cold climates. Maine has one of the most aggressive heat pump retrofit programs in the country. So if that's any indication of how they can be applied to cold climates, there you go. Then you've got your water heater, heat pump water heater, sometimes called hybrid water heaters. They are, about 300% efficient. Now that might sound weird. The brilliance of a heat pump is that you're taking heat from the air in this case and kind of condensing the heat and putting it to use in your home. And it takes 1 watt of electrical input to get 3 watts of useful heat through a heat pump. That's why it's about 300% efficient. It might seem weird. How can you exceed 100% efficiency? But that's the way it is. Your energy in, you get about 3 times more energy out from a heat pump system on average for a lot of regions. So the heat pump water heater is your very energy efficient electric alternative to electric or gas water heaters. This is a no-brainer. If you have an electric resistance water heater, which is the normal water heater, I think 40% of American homes have an electric resistance water heater. You'll save money right away. Like, go ahead, even if it's just 5 years old, replace that and you'll save hundreds of dollars a year. If you have a natural gas water heater, this water heater will cost about the same to operate as the natural gas water heater, but you can do it with no carbon emissions. And then the induction range or cooktop, I'll actually talk just a little bit more in a second about that. I also want to touch on advanced efficient electric heating equipment like ground source heat pumps. So similar to how an air source heat pump is taking heat out of the air and putting it to productive use, a ground source heat pump is taking heat out of the ground. And the important difference here, one important difference, is that you have a much more stable supply of heat underground through the winter. So when it gets really cold outside, your air source heat pump, of course, is going to work a little bit harder to extract the heat from the outside air, although it can do that in sub-freezing conditions. Whereas the ground source heat pump is just going to kind of keep on cruising all year long. And because of that, it's a more efficient system. The downside is it's also more expensive to install. But in this one system, you can get your heating, cooling, and water heating all in one very, very efficient system. Basic cost effectiveness overview of these different things. So I mentioned air source heat pumps. The upfront cost of installing an air source heat pump is on par with replacing your air conditioning and heating systems. It's important to remember that your heat pump system is your heating and cooling system in one. You simplified the technology. You've got one system delivering very efficient heating and cooling. And they're typically more efficient on the cooling side than your standard air conditioning. So the upfront cost for the heat pump is pretty much comparable to replacing both your AC and your heating system. The operating cost is on par with an efficient AC and natural gas furnace. Where it really benefits, if you have oil or propane heat, then heat pump systems are far and away more affordable. I think the life cycle cost in the estimate in Maryland is that you would save something like $10,000 over the life of the system by replacing a oil heating system with a heat pump system. Ground source heat pumps, I mentioned, high upfront cost, but those are typically recouped through energy savings in 5 to 10 years. Again, incentives matter a lot here. Heat pump water heaters, I addressed that one. And then with induction cooking, there's not really an energy or a cost savings here. You're pretty much going to spend the same amount. It's on average $30 to $40 a year using an induction cooktop as you would with a gas cooktop. And they do have slightly higher upfront costs. Those costs are coming down as more and more suppliers are bringing these into market. But the main reason actually I think to be excited about induction ranges and cooktops has to do with the indoor air quality benefits of switching to a non-combustion source for cooking. So children who are in homes with gas stoves are 40% more likely to have asthma than children who live in homes with electric stoves. It's based on UCLA research. As you can see here, some EPA research found that homes with gas stoves had between 50 and 400% higher concentrations of nitrogen dioxide than homes without. Nitrogen dioxide, or NOx, is connected to a number of health conditions. So the research on this is actually still fairly new and evolving, but there's speculation that as the public health researchers dive deeper into this, they're going to realize that there are even more public health implications to cooking with gas. And most homes do not have the adequate enough ventilation to really clear the fumes away from the cooking area. So I think that's a major reason to really think about switching to induction electric for cooking. Here's a big thing I want you to remember with all of this. It takes planning to figure out how to electrify your home heating systems. Most people wait until a system fails. Oh, our furnace isn't working and it's the middle of January. That's a guaranteed time to call a HVAC technician and have your furnace replaced with nearly the identical furnace, right? And now you're going to have that new furnace for the next 20 years. Plan and figure out, talk to an HVAC installer, ideally one who's experienced with both air source and ground source heat pump systems, and figure out, what does this transition look like? What incentives exist? Once you identify, well, this sort of system would work well for us, what incentives exist to buy and install that system? And then, do you have the right electrical service to power that? Many homes have the availability on their electric panel. Some homes are going to need an electric panel upgrade to handle the different types of equipment that I'm talking about. So it takes some planning, and I encourage you to do that planning when your current systems are still working and not wait for a cold day in January to start that planning. All right, and then just for the fun of it, I want to throw in there a quick tip on healthy, low-impact food, because it's just so simple, and it's a pretty significant part of each of our carbon footprints. It's a simple rule. Eat less meat, and especially red meat. This is something that you're consistently hearing from both physicians and from environmentalists, because it happens that from the environmental side, the clearing of forests to make space for cattle ranching is destabilizing the climate, and it's a main driver for habitat loss and the mass extinction of species. In just my lifetime, we have lost half of this world's biodiversity. That is shocking, to say the least. And it's clearly a trajectory that we need to get off of. One serving of beef has a much larger climate impact than a serving of chicken, fish, or eggs. So I'm not here to preach and tell you to go full vegan right now. But I am saying that if you decrease especially your red meat consumption, there are human health for you, your personal wellness benefits, and also some significant environmental benefits. Physicians are recommending limiting beef, lamb, and pork because they're linked with cancer, heart disease, and premature death. So, please think seriously about what you choose to put in your mouth. So what I'm hoping really is that each of you create an action plan. And one of those steps happens, actually two of these can happen today. So signing up for 100% renewable electricity if you live in a state that is deregulated and allows you to choose your electricity supplier. The other immediate thing you can do today is to think very carefully about what you choose to put in your mouth. And the other two are about planning. Make a pledge or a plan. This is more of like a pledge. You don't really have to make the plan until you're like, okay, I'm going to start vehicle shopping now. But make a pledge that if you need a new vehicle at some point, that your next one is going to be an electric vehicle. And then make a plan for replacing all of your combustion equipment in your home. And trust me, again, plan. Like it does involve some planning and consideration. All right, well, that was my run through of 4 quick tips for decarbonizing your home. So with that, let me end the slideshow and I welcome any questions, comments that you have.
We had a couple come in. So I think there was one about owning a car. So if one doesn't own a car, does Ubering or Zip cars compromise one's goals of carbon neutrality?
There's not a crystal clear answer to this. There have been some studies on the environmental impact of car sharing. One thing I could say is that unless Uber has committed to this more recently, I know Lyft a couple years ago committed to carbon neutrality for all of its rides. So if you're using Lyft, then regardless of the car that you hop into, they are taking all of their emissions for the year and then offsetting them. So in theory, it's a carbon neutral ride. There is an environmental impact to producing a car, right? If your activities are taking advantage of, and this is true, this is a mindset to use kind of across the board for everything. If you're taking advantage of things that already exist, right? Scour your neighborhood listserv for, and this is my mindset right now, right? Like, you don't need to buy new kids' toys, just like people put them out on the curb, and listservs are great for this. So, take advantage of the things that exist, including transportation options, and try to not have a manufacturer produce thousands of pounds of resources, for your personal enjoyment. With electric vehicles and renewable energy supply, once you get over that hurdle of the environmental impact of the production of the vehicle, you have relatively carbon-free operations. There are additional environmental impacts. This is nitty-gritty, but there are some really harmful chemicals in car tires, that are killing aquatic ecosystems. As we've got all this micro debris on our roads that gets washed into our local streams. So anyhow, I wish I could say that there's like a really clean, clear solution. Walk and bike as much as you can for your own health and for the planet's health. That's my short, easy answer to that.
There is a light rail being built into, it's not like walking or biking, but I'm also a fan of the free groups on Facebook. So I'm supporting in that way. We also had a question, should one consider a point of source water heater rather than a tank?
About a decade ago, the conventional wisdom in the environmental community was that a instant water heater was a little bit more energy efficient than a tank water heater. A tank water heater has to maintain hot water all the time, and you're using a bit more fuel from any source to maintain hot water even when you don't need it. I think now that we've got heat pump water heaters that are so energy efficient, what I'm hearing in the environmental community is pretty much in lockstep. let's go toward these tank storage, heat pump water heaters. And also, and this is, a little bit nerdy here, but that has some significant grid resiliency benefits. So the thing about a smart heat pump water heater is that there are times when we have excess power available on our grid. And in those moments, that power needs to go somewhere. And especially, like, what if we're producing a whole bunch of renewable power on a bright sunny day? Where do you store all of it? Well, smart heat pump water heaters can, you can basically say for, matters of pennies per kilowatt hour, please dump that clean energy that's available on the grid right now into my heat pump water heater. And you know what? It's going to run when the sun is shining, and it's going to have all the hot water I need for this evening when the sun goes away. So that energy storage capacity of a heat pump water heater has significant grid management benefits. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think in Maryland right now, through through Pepco or BGE or whoever your utility is, I think the electric utilities are offering a $300 incentive to purchase a heat pump water heater. If you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and you'll be able to get that rebate. And that's in part because they are gearing up for being able to deploy smart system technologies to their customers.
Thanks. So a couple questions back to cars. So these are just questions kind of, one person says, what about a hybrid car where they live in a community where it would be difficult to charge the electric vehicle? And then similarly, someone asked kind of, they own a house, but still don't know how they'd charge a vehicle safely in terms of people, kids, passerbys in the neighborhood, not interrupting the charge, or logistically, because she lives in a large city.
Yeah, so plugging in EVs in cities is a major challenge in cities that city planners are trying to figure out right now. What does that best look like? And I don't have all the answers there. So I would say that their city kind of planning department, and if she happens to live in DC, DC is very far along in developing these plans. And actually, since I know Dan Hayes is a planner, if he happens to have the urban answer to this question, then I'll welcome him to jump in on this. But I don't know what that solution necessarily looks like. Part of that solution I know looks like developing a fast charge network, which you can think of as basically fueling stations. Battery technology is already at the point where you can get like an 80% charge for some of the modern batteries that are coming out in like 15 minutes. And what they're talking about is within a few years, that'll be within, I think, 2 years, the estimate is that they'll be down to like a 5-minute charge. Now you're getting to the point of like pulling into a service station like you do now with your car and fueling up. For many reasons, including the cost of electricity and grid stability, at-home overnight charging needs to be the preferred solution. That is admittedly easier for those of us who live in more of a suburban setting. It is a challenge in urban areas. And if anyone on the call has information on kind of what the best case is for what that looks like in cities, I'd be interested in hearing it too. There was I think you had another car related question. Oh, a hybrid. I also want to point out that if your electricity supply is your standard grid electricity supply, the carbon impact of an electric vehicle is pretty much the same as a hybrid, which is to say that if you're driving a Prius around, that is already a super fuel efficient car. Like, love your hybrid, keep driving it. I think that for cost reasons, you will be driven eventually toward buying an electric vehicle, especially as the purchase price of them comes down and the cost of operating them will be far less than a hybrid car. But yeah, I mean, I've been a hybrid driver for 2 decades, so I'm a big fan.
Awesome. And then Andrea answered Laura's question about there's an alarm that goes off if your car is unplugged without your keys nearby. So that's safety wise good for urban areas. Then we have a question, and we'll just answer these last couple questions. If one enjoys radiators for heat, is there a replacement for a gas furnace similar to electric water heaters?
Dan, I knew Dan was on here to heckle me.
These are good pop quiz questions.
It's me. One of the things I love about this 1908 house is it has hot water radiators. And during the winter, they heat up and then they keep giving off heat for a while, so you're not having it run all the time. And you're also not dealing with air going around, you're dealing with just the heat that radiates. So if one wants to keep the hot water radiator system, is there something to generate the heat that's sort of in the same way you do for a hot water heater, so you can get rid of the furnace? That's the question.
So I'm venturing outside of my realm right now, but I know that there are heat pump to. So what I talked about before was like especially with like a ground source heat pump, was a water to air system in terms of transferring heat to the air inside your house through a ducted system. There are water to water systems, so I think that you can have a hot water radiator system in your house through heat pumps. But what I typically hear about is replacing hot water system or radiator systems with like mini split systems in different rooms. So I don't know if because I so often hear that as being the preferred solution, what the drawbacks are, or if there's a technical limitation I'm not aware of for having, especially I would think a ground source heat pump system, be able to provide all the hot water. That happens at the campus level, pretty frequently, but I'm not sure at the residential level.
Thanks. And then last question, unless anyone wants to throw in one more, because we're at time. Are electrical storage batteries for the home at the technological and technological and financial feasibility level to make them worthwhile?
Again, not something I've looked into a whole lot. My thinking is no, based on what I've heard of the cost of like the Tesla solar wall, the power wall, and its relatively limited storage capacity. Someone who a good friend of mine is very deep into this sort of stuff, and his feeling was that with the advances that they're seeing in battery storage, he thinks that devices of the future are possibly our furnace, heat pump systems and furnaces and everything else might even just come, and this is maybe a decade out, with built-in power storage. So there would be a built-in battery that can provide like 24-hour, emergency power already built in. So you're not talking about a separate power storage unit in your house. It's just baked into all this equipment. And it may be the utilities, the grid supply, the grid operators that are pushing that for grid resilience issues. That's hearsay, that's speculation, but I don't know. Take it with a grain of salt.
Great. Well, thanks, Mark. That kind of wraps things up. I've been getting some private messages about maybe sharing your slides, so maybe we can do that in a thank you email and your contact information in case folks have questions. But thank you for your time. Any other final thoughts from you or any of your friends here? No?
I'm just glad to see that people showed up and wanted to participate in this topic today. So
yeah.
It's great. And Andrea, it's great seeing you. How's it going?
Oh, I missed you. Hi, Mark.
family reunion. Yes, well, thank you, Mark, and thanks to Mark's friends, a couple of them showing up, and to our alumni who showed up. Looks like everyone's loving it in the chat. We will share the information that Mark shared, and if you have any interest in any of our other Home 101 events, they're going on all this week into next Monday. So we basically have one a day if you're interested. But otherwise, that's it for us. I will send out some information after the meeting, and have a great day. Go Terps. Have a good one. All right.